Sam Bridger heard this breathing before he saw her. Ragged, wet, wrong. He'd been checking the irrigation gates at first light, widow's habit, 8 years running, when the sound drifted up from the main ditch. Not an animal, too deliberate, too human. He found her collapsed at the water's edge. Apache woman, maybe 25, left leg bent at an angle that made his stomach turn. Her buckskin dress was torn, blood-stained. Dust caked her black hair. She'd crawled to his water. You could see the drag marks in the wet earth. 20 yards of desperation. Her eyes opened when his shadow fell across her. Dark eyes, fever bright, fixing on his face with an intensity that felt like judgment. She tried to speak. Apache words he half remembered from the war. Then English, barely a whisper. Stones, your land, they lied to you. Her hand clutched a leather pouch at her throat. Then fever took her under. Sam carried her across the threshold as sunrise broke orange over the Mazatzel peaks. Not how he'd imagined ending 8 years of solitude, but the land had a way of deciding these things for you. He laid her on his bed, the only bed, and lit 2 lamps. The compound fracture was bad but clean. Femur snapped below the knee, bone pressing white against the skin but not through. He'd seen worse during the war. Set worse, too, though his hands weren't as steady now as they'd been at 30. He cut away the torn buckskin with his surgical scissors. The smell of carbolic acid filled the cabin as he cleaned the wound, the sharp chemical bite mixing with the iron scent of her blood. Her breathing stayed shallow, regular. Unconscious was a mercy for what came next. Sam had learned field medicine from necessity. Too many men dying for want of a steady hand and clean water. After the war, he'd studied properly. 3 years with Doc Harrison in Prescott, learning the difference between keeping a man breathing and actually healing him. This wasn't a man, though. This was an Apache woman on his land during a time when that alone could get them both killed. He pushed the thought aside, aligned the bone with practiced pressure. She didn't wake, but her body went rigid. The cedar splint strips creaked as he bent them into place, wrapping them tight with strips of clean burlap and rawhide cord. His wife's old petticoat, torn and boiled. Anna would have approved of the use. When he finished, gray dawn had turned to full morning light. He checked her pulse. Strong enough. Brewed willow bark tea from his medicine stores and managed to get half a cup between her lips before she choked and turned her head. Easy, he murmured. It's for the pain. Her eyes didn't open. He settled into the chair beside the bed, exhausted despite the early hour. That's when he noticed the leather pouch still clutched in her left hand. Sam hesitated, then carefully worked it free from her fingers. The leather was fine, professionally tanned. Not the rough pounding you saw from reservation work. Inside, folded papers, official-looking with territorial seals. He spread them on the table where lamplight could reach. Certificate of appointment. Nayland, daughter of Chief Taney, appointed treaty interpreter for the territory of Arizona, dated March 1872. Federal Commission. Signed by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Sam read it twice. Treaty interpreter, not a random traveler. Not a raiders woman fleeing conflict. A federal employee, educated, official. Which raised a question that sat heavier than the morning heat. What in God's name was she doing crawling through his irrigation ditch at dawn? The rope bed frame creaked when she woke. Sam had moved to his desk reviewing his own papers, the homestead patent he'd filed in '68, the survey maps, the deed that said these 160 acres belonged to him, legal and clear. He looked up at the sound. Her eyes were open, watching him. Morning, he said quietly. You're safe. I'm a doctor. Was a doctor. Still am, I suppose, when the need arises. She didn't respond. Her gaze traveled the cabin, the medical books on the shelf, the instruments laid out for cleaning, the framed photograph of a woman on the mantel, Anna, taken a year before she'd died, then Nolan's eyes fixed on something else. The deed, hanging framed beside the window. The one piece of paper Sam treated like scripture. Water, she said. Her English was clear despite the hoarseness. Sam brought a cup, helped her sit up enough to drink without choking. She took 3 long swallows, then pushed his hand away gently. You own this land? She nodded toward the framed deed. Papers say yes? Homestead patent. Filed 1868, approved 69. It's mine legal. She studied his face. Something moved behind her eyes. Calculation, maybe, or recognition. You build the irrigation? She asked. Every ditch. Took me 4 years to map the springs right, get the grades correct. You rid the land, she said. Not a question. I learned. From who? Sam opened his mouth to answer, then stopped, because the truth was complicated. An Apache elder had shown him, during the smallpox outbreak in '63, how to find water by reading stone formations and plant growth, how the earth spoke if you learned its language. A friend, he said finally. Long time ago. Nayland settled back against the pillow, her breath coming faster from the effort of sitting. The splint on her leg looked crude in the morning light, but it would hold. Papers, she said softly, her eyes closing. They lie sometimes. Ma'am? Your deed, his deed. Both cannot be true. I don't follow, but sleep took her again, or she chose not to answer. Her breathing evened out. Sam stood there holding the empty cup, his mind working the problem. His deed. Both cannot be true. Who else claimed his land? From outside came the sound he'd learned to dread. Horse hooves on the hardpack road. Fast, purposeful, more than one rider. His hand moved to the rifle above the door. Never good company out here, he muttered, checking the load. Through the window, he counted 3 horses. The lead rider wore a silver hat band that caught the sun like a warning. Sam stepped onto the porch before the riders could reach his door. The rifle stayed visible in his hands, but pointed at nothing in particular. Old habit from years when showing you were armed kept conversations civil. The lead rider wasn't one of the 3 he'd spotted. It was a wagon, and Martha Henley at the reins. Sam Bridger, you put that rifle down before I take offense, she called, pulling her team to a halt 20 yards out. He lowered the Winchester. Thought you were someone else. I probably am, knowing your luck. Martha climbed down with the stiff movements of a woman past 50 who'd spent too many hours on a hard wagon seat. Got supplies you ordered, and news you won't like. Sam glanced back at the cabin door. Nayland was hidden, asleep, but voices carried. Let me help you unload. News first. Martha's face had the set expression she wore when delivering bad tidings. She'd perfected it, over 20 years running Clearwater's only general store, long enough to watch half the territory go bust or broke. Clayton Morse bought your debt from the bank. The words hit like a fist to the gut. When? Yesterday afternoon. Bank didn't even give you notice. Just sold the paper straight to him. She pulled an envelope from her apron pocket. 7 days to auction, Sam. $800, or you're done. Sam took the envelope. The territorial seal was authentic, the signature's legal. 7 days, his hand wanted to shake. He kept it steady through sheer will. I've got most of that, he said. 600 saved. I can borrow. From who? Martha's voice was gentle but firm. Everyone with cash money is scared of Clayton. He's done this to 8 families on the Verde River in the past 3 years. You're number 9. She moved closer, lowering her voice. Sam, there's more. He's offering you $1,000 cash if you sell today. More than what you owe. Why would he do that? Same reason he bought the debt. There's something on this land he wants bad enough to pay premium. From inside the cabin came a faint sound, the rope bed frame creaking. Martha's eyes flicked to the door. You got Apache trouble on top of this? She asked quietly. No trouble. Sam. No trouble, he repeated, meeting her gaze. Just doing what's right by someone who needed help. Martha studied him for a long moment. She'd known him since he'd arrived in the territory, had extended him credit when no one else would, had stood witness when he'd buried Anna. If anyone in Clearwater could be trusted, it was her. Then you be careful, she said finally. Clayton Morse is a snake in a Sunday suit, and whatever he wants from you, he won't stop at legal means to get it. And she helped him unload the supplies, salt, coffee, carbolic acid, more bandages. As she climbed back onto her wagon, she paused. That offer of his? 1,000 for land worth maybe 600? Sam, he never pays more unless... She stopped herself. Unless what? Unless there's something on your land worth killing for. The wagon pulled away, dust rising in its wake. Sam stood on the porch, watching it disappear down the road toward town. 7 days, $800. And Clayton Morse, circling like a vulture who'd already picked the bones clean in his mind. The sound of approaching hooves made him turn. This time it was the 3 riders he'd seen earlier. Clayton Morse dismounted with the easy confidence of a man who owned half of what he could see and aimed to own the rest. 52 years old, gray threading his temples, expensive clothes tailored in Tucson. His boots alone cost more than Sam's entire medicine kit. Sam Bridger, Clayton's voice carried the false warmth of a politician. Fine morning. Morse. Sam stayed on the porch, rifle still in his hands. Now, is that any way to greet a neighbor? You're not my neighbor. You're my creditor, apparently. Clayton smiled. The 2 men flanking him, hired guns from the look of them, stayed mounted. One had his hand resting easy on his belt, too close to his revolver to be casual. That I am. Though I prefer to think of it as an opportunity for both of us. Clayton pulled a folded paper from his jacket. The movement brought a whiff of cologne, bay rum, and something floral, out of place in the desert morning. I've come to discuss a complication with your deed. My deed's legal, surveyed and filed proper. That's the interesting part. Clayton unfolded the document. Even from the porch, Sam could see the crisp paper, too clean for something supposedly 40 years old. This is a Spanish land grant, dated 1820. It covers this property, including your homestead. That's impossible. I thought the same thing. Had my lawyer in Tucson review it. Turns out there's an overlap. Your claim and this grant cover the same 160 acres. Clayton's smile widened. Which means we've got a legal conflict that'll take months to sort through the courts. Meanwhile, you foreclose. The debt comes due regardless of title dispute. That's territorial law. Clayton refolded the paper with theatrical care. But I'm a reasonable man, Sam. I'll give you $1,000 cash for this place. More than what you owe, enough to start fresh somewhere else. Why would you pay premium for land that's in legal dispute? Clayton's smile didn't falter, but something cold moved behind his eyes. Let's just say I have use for it. Railroad. Sam saw it suddenly, clear as the springs he'd mapped. The southern spur, they need water. The railroad needs a water source for the depot they're planning 30 miles south. This land sits on the only viable spring system for 20 miles in any direction. Clayton's pretense of friendliness dropped. They'll pay $15,000 for rights to pipe water from here, and I aim to be the man who sells it to them. The number hung in the air between them. $15,000, enough to buy half a town, enough to kill for. So you forged a Spanish grant, Sam said flatly. Careful with accusations, Bridger. I have lawyers. You have 7 days and not enough money. Clayton mounted his horse with practiced ease. Think about my offer, $1,000. More than generous. Get off my land. It's not your land, not for much longer. Clayton turned his horse, then paused at the fence line. His gaze swept across the irrigation ditches, the careful grading, the strategic placement that found every spring and carried water exactly where it was needed. That irrigation system of yours, he said slowly. Real clever how you found all those springs. Mapped the underground flows so precise. Almost like someone taught you to read the land. His eyes fixed on Sam. Indian clever, if you catch my meaning. Sam's jaw tightened. 7 days, Bridger. I'll see you at the courthouse steps. Clayton and his men rode off, the sound of hooves fading down the road. Sam stood there gripping the rifle hard enough that his knuckles went white. $15,000. Forged documents. A judge who was probably already bought. Behind him, the cabin door opened. Nayland stood braced against the frame, her face pale, but her dark eyes alert. Now you understand, she said quietly. Papers lie. But the stones, the old boundary markers, they tell truth. Sam helped Nayland back to the bed. She moved with the careful stiffness of someone learning to navigate pain, her hand gripping his arm harder than she probably meant to. The splint held, but every step cost her. You shouldn't be up, he said. I should not be here at all, yet here I am. She settled against the pillow with a sharp exhale. Show me both deeds, his and yours. Sam retrieved his framed homestead patent from the wall and laid it on the bed beside her. The paper was 8 years old, edges yellowed, but the territorial seal was clear. Then he fetched Clayton's Spanish grant, or rather, the crude sketch he'd made of it while Clayton had been talking. He hadn't gotten to examine the actual document. Nayland studied them with an intensity that seemed to burn through her fever. Her fingers traced the boundary descriptions on Sam's deed, lips moving as she read. Water, she said. He brought a cup from the pitcher. The metal sweated in the growing heat, cool condensation against his palm. She drank slowly, eyes never leaving the papers. Your deed, she said finally. It describes boundaries. North by Verde River, south by Redstone Formations, east by, she looked up, the Redstone Formations. You have seen them? Sure. When I surveyed my line before building the ditches, big red sandstone pillars maybe 4 feet high. Got old carvings on them. What kind of carvings? Apache, I figured. Geometric patterns, some star shapes. Thought they were territorial markers from before the treaties. Something sparked in her eyes. Recognition or triumph. Sam couldn't tell which. Not territorial, legal. She shifted position, wincing. My work is treaty interpreter. I study old boundary agreements. Spanish treaties with Apache, Mexican period, American territorial claims. The confusion, it makes my job necessary. I'm not following. The old markers. We call them Nahodit-CE, stones that speak truth. My ancestors placed them at sacred water sources in 1680s during Spanish mission period. Marked them with astronomical carvings, star patterns that align with solstices. Her voice gained strength as she explained. Treaty work taught me this. Those stones are legal documents older than any Spanish paper claim. Sam's mind raced ahead. If those markers predate Clayton's 1820 grant, they do, by 140 years, perhaps more. The carvings show Polaris position from 1680s. Earth wobbles, stars shift over time. We can prove the age. But how does that help me? White courts don't... He stopped himself, but she finished it. White courts do not accept Apache testimony, yes. Bitterness edged her words. Without corroboration, my knowledge is savage fairy tales. This is what the judge will say. The rope bed frame creaked as she lay back, exhausted from the effort of sitting upright. Sam started to apologize, to tell her not to worry about his problems when she could barely move, but the sound of knocking interrupted him. "Sam, need a word about your soul." Father Tomas Durant's voice, unmistakable. 62 years old and still climbing hills in the Arizona heat to check on his scattered flock. Sam opened the door to find the priest standing on his porch, black robes dusty from the ride, a wooden case tucked under one arm. "Father, I heard you had company." Durant's eyes flicked past Sam to the cabin interior, taking in the medical setup, the occupied bed. The kind of company that gets a man talked about in town. "I'm doctoring an injured woman, that's all. I didn't ride out here to judge, Sam." Durant's voice softened. "I rode out because Clayton Morse came to the church this morning, wanted my testimony that you're an unfit landholder, and said you're harboring fugitives, breaking territorial law." "And what did you tell him?" "I told him to get out of God's house before I threw him out." A slight smile crossed the priest's weathered face. "Not very Christian of me, perhaps, but I've watched that man ruin 8 families with forged papers and legal tricks. My conscience won't permit a 9th. Sam felt something loosen in his chest. An ally. An actual ally. "Come in," he said. Durant entered, setting the wooden case on the table. The smell of church incense clung to his robes, frankincense and myrrh, familiar and oddly comforting. He nodded to Nolan, who watched him with wary assessment. "I know something about Apache boundary law," Durant continued. "Mission work in Mescalero territory, 73 and 74. Helped negotiate water rights, using the old stone markers as legal precedent. They hold up in court, if properly documented." He opened the wooden case. Inside, packed in velvet, was a camera. The metal and glass caught lamplight, looking half like science and half like magic. "New technology," Durant explained. "Photographs are admitted as evidence in territorial court since 74. If we can photograph those boundary markers at proper light, sunrise, when the astronomical carvings show clear, we have corroboration. Not just Apache testimony, but documented proof." Sam stared at the camera. Hope, fragile and dangerous, flickered to life. "There's a condition," Durant said. "The woman you're sheltering, I need to meet her. If she's who I think she is, she's the only certified treaty interpreter in the territory. That makes her an expert witness, not just Apache testimony." From the bed, Naline's voice cut through the moment. "Father Durant, your Mescalero mission, 1873. Water rights petition with the territorial government. I translated your boundary documentation." Durant turned slowly. Recognition dawned across his face. "Miss Nayland." His smile was genuine, warm. "I thought that was you when I heard the description. God's timing is remarkable." "Or Apache spirits are finally listening to my prayers," Nayland replied, a hint of dry humor in her voice despite the pain. Durant crossed to the bed, professional respect in his bearing. "Your credentials are still valid? Federal commission?" "In my pouch. Sam has it." Sam retrieved the leather pouch, handed it to Durant. The priest examined the papers carefully, then looked up with something like satisfaction. "This changes everything. Expert witness, federal appointment, documented history of legal interpretation work." He glanced at Sam. "If she testifies about those boundary markers, with my photographs as corroboration, the judge might listen," Sam finished. "Judge Harlan is in Clayton's pocket," Nayland said quietly. "Everyone knows this." "Well, maybe," Durant acknowledged. "But even a corrupt judge hesitates when 40 witnesses are watching. We need to make this public. A pilgrimage, Sunday morning, dawn, to document a historical site. Call it ecclesiastical research if anyone asks." "That's 2 days from now," Sam calculated. 5 days before the auction. Gives us time to gather witnesses. Townspeople who've suffered Clayton's schemes, merchants he's cheated, families he's ruined." Durant's voice carried the steel of a man who'd made his decision. "If we can get 40 people to that boundary site at sunrise, see those markers with their own eyes, sign affidavits, that becomes public record, harder for Harlan to ignore." Sam looked between them. The injured Apache woman who'd crawled to his water, the Catholic priest risking his parish for justice. An impossible alliance, assembled by accident or providence, depending on what you believed. "We'll need protection," he said. "Clayton won't let this happen peacefully." Durant's expression hardened. "Then we make sure enough witnesses show up that violence becomes its own evidence of guilt." The emergency hearing convened at 10 o'clock in the morning, the courthouse already stifling despite the hour. 40 townspeople packed the benches, the smell of tobacco smoke and nervous sweat thickening the air. Sam sat at the plaintiff's table with Nayland beside him in a wheelchair Durant had borrowed from the church. Her leg, splinted and elevated, drew stares. Judge Harlan, 60 years old, jowled, silver watch chain gleaming across his vest, surveyed the courtroom with the expression of a man interrupted from more important business. "This court is convened to hear emergency petition regarding property deed dispute, Bridger versus Morse. Counselors, make it quick." Clayton's lawyer stood. Expensive suit, Tucson trained, the kind of man who knew exactly which legal loopholes paid the most. Your Honor, the matter is simple. Mr. Morse holds a Spanish land grant dated 1820 that supersedes the defendant's 1868 homestead patent. Standard precedent favors the earliest dated claim. We request immediate validation and order of foreclosure on the conflicting property. Sam didn't have a lawyer, couldn't afford one on 5 days' notice. He stood, feeling every eye in the courtroom on him. Judge, that Spanish grant is a forgery. I have evidence. What evidence? Harlan's voice cut like a blade. Apache boundary markers on my land. Stone markers dated to the 1680s, proving prior claim that any legitimate Spanish grant would have referenced. Upon what authority do you claim these stones are dated to 1680s? Expert testimony. Miss Nolan is a federal treaty interpreter, appointed 1872. She studied these markers for Indian testimony. Harlan's eyebrows rose. He didn't need to finish the sentence. The courtroom murmurs did it for him. Nalen's hand gripped the wheelchair arm. She started to stand, crutches scraping against floorboards, her face tight with pain but her voice steady. I am certified treaty interpreter, federal appointment. She produced her credentials, hand shaking slightly as she held them up. Territorial statute allows expert witness designation for documented specialists in Miss... Harlan made a show of examining the papers a clerk brought forward. Nolan, your credentials appear in order. However, he set them aside with deliberate care. Testimony regarding landmarkers placed by your own people constitutes conflicted interest. Territorial Statute 42 requires corroborating witness of established standing, or your testimony is inadmissible without secondary evidence. We have secondary evidence, Durant said, rising from the gallery. Photographs, Your Honor, and ecclesiastical documentation. I'm prepared to testify. Father Durant, unless you can date those markers through independent means. Your testimony merely confirms their existence, not their age. Harlan's gavel struck once. The court finds insufficient evidence to challenge the Spanish grant's validity. 7 days remains until foreclosure auction. Auction proceeds as scheduled, day 7, 10 o'clock. These courthouse steps. The gavel struck again. Sam felt the floor drop out from under him. Martha Henley stood in the back, her face furious. Several townspeople looked ready to protest, but Harlan was already gathering his papers. Your Honor, I have questions about the Spanish grant's authenticity, Martha called out. Court dismissed. Third gavel strike, final. Clayton Morse's victory smile was a knife in the gut. They filed out into the brutal midday sun. Sam helped Nayland back into the wagon Durant had brought. Her fever was back. He could feel it radiating from her skin. We photographed the markers anyway, Durant said quietly. Today, now, before Clayton destroys them. She needs rest, Sam protested. I need justice. Nayland's voice was weak but determined. We go now. Before those stones disappear like 8 other families' hopes. They reached the Verde River boundary by 4 in the afternoon, the sun still high and merciless. Sam had ridden here 100 times while building his irrigation system, but he'd never looked at the red sandstone pillars the way Nalin was looking at them now. 4 markers stood in a rough square, each about 4 feet tall, weathered by 2 centuries of wind and rain. The stone's rough texture showed clear under his palm as he steadied himself, warm from the sun, gritty with embedded minerals. Nalin directed Sam to position her where she could see all 4 markers. Durant unpacked his camera with the careful movements of someone handling both precious and fragile equipment. These, Nalin said, pointing to the carvings on the eastern marker, tell date. Star pattern, you see? Polaris here, constellation there. This alignment only happens every... She closed her eyes, calculating. This is winter solstice 1683, maybe 1684. The Earth wobbles slowly. Stars shift position over centuries. This proves age. Sam stared at the geometric patterns he'd dismissed as decorative. Seen through Nolan's explanation, they became a calendar carved in stone. In this text, Durant asked, already positioning his camera, where sacred water rises, marked by ancestors, witnessed winter solstice 1683, blessed by 3 clans, Chihane, Nde, Mescalero, protected for 7 generations. Nolan's voice carried the weight of ritual. Your land, Sam Bridger, sits on water source my people marked as sacred before any Spanish or American claimed this territory. 137 years, Sam calculated. Clayton's Spanish grant, if it was even real, which he doubted, postdated these markers by over a century. This is it, he breathed. This proves my deed is legitimate. That his grant is... The rifle shot cracked across the canyon. Rock exploded 6 inches from Durant's head. The priest threw himself sideways, camera crashing to the ground. Sam had his revolver out before conscious thought, scanning the ridgeline. Get off Morse property. The shout came from above. Jackson, Clayton's foreman, visible now on the western ridge with a Winchester. 2 more men flanked him. We're documenting legal evidence, Durant shouted back, checking his camera. The lens was cracked, glass scattered on red earth. Judge said Indian testimony don't count. These rocks don't count neither. Second shot hit closer. Deliberate intimidation, though whether the next one would be was anyone's guess. We need to go, Sam said urgently, helping Nayland back toward the horses. Her breathing came ragged, too fast. The fever had spiked. He could see it in her glassy eyes, the tremor in her hands. Drant grabbed what he could of the camera equipment. I got 3 plates. Maybe one is usable. Now, Father. They rode back toward Sam's ranch, Jackson's laughter echoing behind them like a promise. By the time they reached the cabin, Nayland was barely conscious, her skin burning under Sam's steadying hand. He carried her inside, laid her on the bed. Her legs showed early signs of infection, red streaking up from the wound site despite the carbolic cleaning. The fever was worse than before, her body fighting on 2 fronts now. 5 days, Durant said from the doorway, his voice hollow. We have 5 days, and those markers will be destroyed by morning. Not if we get 40 witnesses there first, Sam replied, checking Nayland's pulse. Fast. Too fast. How do we gather 40 people without Clayton knowing? We don't hide it. Durant's expression hardened into something between prayer and fury. Sunday service. I'll announce a pilgrimage to witness historical documentation. Call it church business, legal and public. He can still kill us at the boundary. Not if we make sure the judge attends too. Nayland's voice, barely a whisper, cut through their planning. Both men turned. Her eyes were closed, but her words came clear. Make it impossible for him to claim ignorance. Force him to witness. Sam dampened a cloth, placed it on her forehead. The fever burned through it almost immediately. She needs real medicine, he said. Carbolic isn't enough. She needs rest, time. She needs her testimony heard, Durant finished. Which means she needs to survive 5 more days. Can you keep her alive that long? Sam looked down at the woman who'd crawled to his water seeking salvation, and instead found herself in the middle of a war, over papers and stones, and $15,000 in railroad money. I'll keep her alive, he said. Through the window, the western ridge showed dark against the setting sun. Up there, Sam knew, Jackson and his men were probably already destroying the boundary markers, erasing 2 centuries of carved truth with sledgehammers and spite. All they had left was time running out and a desperate plan that required 40 people to risk Clayton, Morse's wrath. The fever broke near midnight. Sam had stayed at her bedside, changing cool compresses every 20 minutes, monitoring the red streaks on her leg that meant infection spreading. He'd seen men die from less. The carbolic helped, but what she really needed was rest and time. 2 things they didn't have. Her eyes opened when he was replacing the cloth on her forehead. Clear eyes, fever-dimmed but present. Still here, she murmured. Where else would I go? Men leave when things become difficult. This is my experience. Sam wrung out the cloth, the water in the basin still faintly warm from her skin. Not this man, not tonight. She watched him work in silence. Then, I can teach you, the marker symbols, so you understand what we defend. You should rest. I should do many things, this matters more. And Sam brought paper and the lamp closer. Nayland dipped her finger in the water basin and began drawing on the paper. Crude, wet lines that caught the lamplight. This line connects to Polaris, North Star, but not Polaris as it sits now in sky. Her finger traced the pattern with careful precision. Polaris in 1683 position. Earth wobbles. Axis shifts over centuries. Very slow. This is how we prove age. Sam leaned closer, studying the geometry. His wife had tried to teach him astronomy once, pointing out constellations from their porch. He'd been too busy with irrigation schedules to pay proper attention. Now he wished he'd listened. So this angle here shows where Polaris was 200 years ago. Different from now by nearly 1 degree. Nayland drew another symbol. And this, winter solstice sunrise alignment. Sunrises at different point on horizon in summer versus winter. Markers show winter position. Sam took a piece of charcoal from the stove, tried copying her drawings. His hand was clumsy, the lines too thick. Nayland's fingers, hot with fever but steady, covered his, guiding the strokes. Like this, slower, patient. The smell of lamp black mixed with the lingering carbolic. The cricket song outside providing rhythm to their work. An hour passed, maybe 2. Sam learned the symbols slowly, with the methodical patience of a man past 40 who'd learned that understanding beats speed every time. The stones, he said eventually. They're not just markers, they're legal documents. Yes, older than any paper, stronger than any court. She leaned back, exhausted. But white law does not see this. To them, we are savages who scratched rocks. Durant sees it. Durant is one man. So was I, Sam said quietly, when my wife died. when I buried her and the baby both on a Tuesday morning 8 years ago. One man on 160 acres, trying to figure out how to keep going. He set down the charcoal. This land was Anna's dream. She picked the spot for the cabin, planned where the garden would go, died before seeing any of it work. And now you lose it to a liar. Not if those markers can speak in a language the court understands. He looked at the drawings they'd made. We teach them to listen. Nayland's hand found his. A brief touch, understanding without words. Then sleep took her under again, her breathing evening out. Sam sat there in the lamplight, studying the symbols he'd drawn, feeling the weight of 200 years of carved truth pressing against 7 days of forged lies. Outside, a rooster crowed, false dawn, time to plan. Father Durant arrived at first light with Martha close behind. They gathered around Sam's table, 4 people with coffee and desperation, plotting resistance over the smell of brewing grounds and morning cold seeping through the walls. Sunday service, Durant said without preamble. I announce a pilgrimage to document historical markers. Dawn Monday morning, all welcome. That's 4 days from now, Martha calculated. 3 days before the auction. Gives us time to gather witnesses without making Clayton suspicious. Durant pulled out a list he'd been compiling. I can deliver 20 from my congregation. People who've seen his methods, who'll stand witness if asked. Martha nodded. I'll get 15 through the store. Merchants he's cheated on credit, families who remember his other schemes. She glanced at Sam. That's 35. We need 40 to make it legal public record. Where do we find 5 more? Nolan's voice came from the bed, stronger than it had been at midnight. 2 Apache families on treaty land, near the boundary. They will come if I send word. That's dangerous for them, Sam said. Everything is dangerous now. They understand this. 37, Durant counted. We're still short. Judge Harlan, Martha's suggestion landed like a stone in still water. We invite him officially. For ecclesiastical documentation of historical site, make it formal. He won't come, Sam said. Doesn't matter if he comes. Matters that he was invited. Makes it official church business, creates legal record. Martha's smile was sharp. And if he does show up, he can't later claim he didn't know about the markers. Durant was already writing. I'll deliver the invitation personally, today. They planned through the morning, logistics, wagon arrangements, witness preparation. Who would bring cameras as backup? Who would document the carvings in writing if photographs failed? Building redundancy into every step because they knew Clayton would attack the weakest point. What about protection? Sam asked. Jackson and his men will be there, probably armed. So will we be, Martha said simply. 40 witnesses, some of them armed, all of them angry. Clayton may own the judge, but he doesn't own the whole territory. Nayland shifted position in the bed, pain crossing her face before she controlled it. He will try to stop this, not at the boundary. Too many witnesses before. On the road. When we are vulnerable, then we travel together, Durant decided. Leave Sam's ranch at 5 in the morning. 2-hour ride in caravan. Strength in numbers. 5 days, Sam said, looking at each of them. A widowed storekeeper, a Catholic priest, an injured Apache interpreter. Himself, a farmer past 40 who'd learned medicine from war and irrigation from listening to the land. We have 5 days to gather 40 people and make them believe stones carry more truth than paper. Durant raised his coffee cup. 5 days to prove justice still exists in Arizona territory. They drank to that. Bitter coffee, no sugar. The taste of hope, mixed with the understanding that hope could get you killed if you weren't careful. As the others prepared to leave, Nayland caught Sam's arm. The gathering. It must be at sunrise. Dawn witness makes vow sacred in Apache custom. This is important. I'll make sure Durant knows. And Sam, her grip tightened. If I die before Monday, you won't. But if I do, my credentials prove you had expert witness. The court must honor it. Sam covered her hand with his. You're not dying, we're winning, both of us. Through the window, the eastern sky showed the first pink of true dawn. 4 days until Sunday. 5 until the ceremony. 7 until he lost everything. Unless 43 people, counting 2 Apache families they hadn't contacted yet, decided truth mattered more than fear. The church pews creaked with unusual weight that Sunday morning. 60 people packed the small whitewashed building, twice the normal congregation. Sam sat in the back with Nayland beside him, her wheelchair positioned where she could see but not be seen easily. The smell of Sunday clothes, lye soap and camphor, mothballs and honest sweat thickened the air. Father Durant stood at the pulpit in his vestments, the morning light through the single stained glass window painting him in reds and golds. But it was the man in the front pew who drew every eye. Clayton Morse, dressed like he owned the building, which, given his donations, he nearly did. Durant began with the usual prayers, then his sermon, seemingly innocent enough, the Gospel of John, chapter 8. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. The words hung in the still air like an accusation. Next week, Durant continued, his voice carrying to the rafters, this church will sponsor a pilgrimage. Dawn Monday morning, we'll document ancient boundary markers at the Verde River, historical sites that predate our territorial claims that speak to the sacred nature of this land and its original peoples. The congregation murmured. Clayton's back went rigid. All are welcome to witness this documentation, Durant pressed on. To see with their own eyes what has stood for centuries, bearing witness to truths older than any paper deed or legal claim. Clayton stood, the bench scraping loud against floorboards. Father, surely you don't mean to drag good Christians to an Apache site based on a fugitive woman's claims? The church went dead silent. Sam Bridger harbors a woman wanted for, Clayton began. Miss Nayland is a federal treaty interpreter. Durant's voice cut clean as a blade. Her credentials are impeccable. Her expertise recognized by the territorial government itself. And the markers we'll document were placed before Arizona was a territory, before your Spanish grant was allegedly written. Someone gasped. Durant had just called Clayton's grant a forgery, in church, in front of 60 witnesses. Clayton's face darkened. You're risking your entire parish for a squatter, and for the truth, Clayton. Martha Henley stood in her pew, 3 rows back. 8 families you've ruined this way. We remember. The blacksmith stood, then the grocer, the schoolteacher, the widow Henderson whose husband had died fighting one of Clayton's foreclosures. One by one, 20 people rose in silent testimony. Clayton's fury barely contained itself behind clenched teeth. You'll all regret this. He stalked out, boots hitting the wooden aisle like gunshots. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the window pane. Durant waited until the sound faded, then calmly. As I was saying, dawn Monday morning, we gather at Sam Bridger's ranch, 5 o'clock. Bring cameras if you have them. Bring witness if you have courage. After the service, Sam found his wagon. Someone had sawed the front axle halfway through, clean cut, hidden by shadows, designed to snap the first time he hit rough ground. Martha examined it with the eye of someone who'd seen this particular trick before. He's not coming to the ceremony. He's making sure you don't get there alive. Or making sure something worse happens on the way, Sam replied, running his finger along the saw marks. The metal was still bright where the blade had cut, recent. Probably last night while they'd been planning. We travel together, Durant said firmly, appearing beside them. No one rides alone. By 3 that afternoon, Sam's ranch had transformed into something between a war council and a church social. Wagons lined his fence, horses crowded his small corral. 43 people, Sam counted twice to be sure, gathered in his yard, on his porch, inside his cabin, where Nolin held court from her wheelchair. 43, 3 more than needed, 3 more than they'd hoped for. Martha moved through the crowd with a list, taking names, organizing wagon assignments. Henderson's ride with the Morales family. Father Durant leads the column. Sam and Miss Nayland in the center, protected. 2 Apache families stood slightly apart, 3 elders, 2 younger men, solemn and watchful. They'd arrived at noon, traveling through treaty land to reach Sam's ranch, risking territorial suspicion for the sake of stones their grandparents had carved. One elder, gray-haired and dignified, spoke to Nayland in Apache. She translated for the group. He says his grandfather helped mark those stones in 1683, winter solstice, when the sun aligned, just so. They carved truth into rock because paper burns. Rock remembers. The elder spoke again, longer this time. Nolan's face grew serious as she listened. He says Clayton Morse will be waiting. Not at the boundary, too many witnesses there. On the road, where we are spread out, vulnerable. She looked at Sam. He asks if we have enough courage for what is coming. Martha was already moving toward her wagon. She returned with her late husband's rifle, cleaned, oiled, loaded. We have enough, she said simply. Others checked their weapons. Not everyone was armed, but enough were. The blacksmith had his revolver. 3 ranchers carried rifles. The widow Henderson produced a small pistol from her purse that made several people blink in surprise. Durant cleared his throat. We're not looking for violence. We're documenting historical evidence. But, he paused, choosing words carefully, we're also not fools. If Clayton sends his men, we stand together. 43 witnesses are harder to silence than 1. But Sam watched them, merchants and farmers, widows and elders, Apache and white, Catholic and Protestant, and probably some who believed in neither. An impossible coalition assembled around the idea that stones told truth and courts should listen. 5 o'clock tomorrow, Durant announced. We gather here, travel together, arrive at the boundary by sunrise, 7:47 to be precise. The light needs to be exact for the astronomical carvings to show properly. And if Jackson and his men block the road? Someone asked. We outnumber them 4 to 1, Martha replied. Let them try. As the crowd began to disperse, making final preparations, the Apache elder approached Sam directly. He spoke in heavily accented English. Your land, our stones, same truth. He placed his hand over his heart, then extended it to Sam. We witnessed together. Sam took his hand, feeling the calluses of 70 years and the weight of 7 generations. Together. The sun was setting when the last wagon pulled away. Sam helped Nayland bow to the cabin, her exhaustion evident but her spirit somehow stronger. 43 people, she said quietly. This is more than we hoped. It's more than I deserve. No. She gripped his arm as they reached the porch. This is exactly what you earned. By opening your home to a dying stranger. By choosing justice over fear. She smiled slightly. Sometimes the land pays back what you plant in it. Through the darkening twilight, a rider appeared on the eastern ridge. Just sitting there, watching. One of Clayton's men, making sure they knew they were being observed. Tomorrow, Sam said. Dawn, we end this. Or it ends us, Nolan replied. Either way, the stones will remember. Sam couldn't sleep. 3:30 in the morning, the cabin dark except for the embers in the stove. In 90 minutes, 43 people would gather in his yard, trusting him to lead them into something that might get them killed. He sat on the porch watching Anna's grave under the cottonwood, 8 years of solitude, and now he was gambling other people's lives on carved stones and the word of a woman he'd known less than a week. Maybe he should just go. Take Clayton's $1,000. Start over somewhere else. Let someone else fight this particular fight. His horse was already saddled before he realized what he was doing. Old instinct. When things got complicated, you moved. The war had taught him that. Keep moving, stay ahead of the trouble. He was tightening the cinch when Nolan's voice came from the doorway. Running? Sam's hands stilled on the leather. Protecting you. Them. This is my fight, not... Your fight ended when you carried me across your threshold. She leaned on her crutches, backlit by the cabin's dim lamp. Now it is our fight, and theirs. She nodded toward the road where, in a few hours, wagons would arrive. Clayton Morse takes land because good men run. You run now, he takes the next ranch. And the next. I'm tired of fighting. You are tired of losing. She moved carefully down the steps, each movement costing her. This time, we win, not with guns. With truth, 43 people will swear they saw. Sam leaned against his horse, feeling the animal's warmth, its steady breathing. What if I'm wrong? What if those stones don't prove anything the court will accept? Then we tried. But if we do not try, she stopped in front of him, her dark eyes holding his. If we do not try, we already lost. She held out her leather credentials pouch. If I die today, this proves you had legal expert witness. Court must honor it. You're not dying. No. And a slight smile. We are winning. Now wake the others. They reached the Verde River boundary as the eastern sky turned from black to gray. 43 people on horseback and wagons, moving in coordinated silence, like an army that had never drilled together, but understood the mission anyway. The 4 red sandstone markers rose from the earth like ancient sentinels. Sam dismounted, helping Nayland down, positioning her where she could see all 4 stones. The morning cold made her breath visible, mixing with the smell of sage and river mud. Durant had 3 cameras this time, his repaired one and 2 borrowed from townspeople. Insurance against sabotage. He set them up at different angles while the witnesses formed a semicircle. These markers, Nolan began, her voice carrying in the dawn quiet, tell the truth of this land. And she translated the eastern marker first, her fingers tracing symbols worn smooth by 2 centuries of weather. Where sacred water rises, marked by ancestors witnessed winter solstice 1683. The astronomical carvings showed clear in the growing light, star patterns that aligned with a Polaris, positioned from 200 years ago. Durant's camera clicked, capturing what eyes could see and courts might finally believe. Nayland moved to the second marker, Sam supporting her. The crowd followed, silent witnesses to carved testimony older than any of their grandparents. She was halfway through translating the 3rd marker when horses appeared on the western ridge. Jackson and 4 men, rifles across their saddles. They rode down slowly, deliberately, stopping 50 yards out. This is private property, Jackson called. You're all trespassing. This is public historical documentation, Durant replied, his voice steady. Witnesses include 2 ordained clergy, a federal interpreter, and... A buggy appeared behind Jackson's men. Black, official, moving at dignified speed down the rough trail. Judge Harlan stepped out. The entire gathering went still. Sam's hand moved unconsciously toward his revolver, then stopped. Harlan's presence changed everything. Witness or executioner, they wouldn't know until he spoke. Your Honor, as Durant recovered first, thank you for accepting our invitation. Harlan surveyed the scene. 4 stone markers, 3 cameras, 43 citizens. Nayland, with her crutches and splinted legs standing between 2 worlds. His expression gave away nothing. I came to see what warranted such unusual invitation. He walked forward, past Jackson's men, who looked uncertain now, past Clayton Morse, who'd appeared on horseback behind them. Harlan examined the markers, studied the astronomical carvings, watched Nalin translate with the careful precision of someone who'd done this work for federal treaties. These carvings, he said finally. Federal interpreter, you claim they date to 1683? The star positions prove it, Your Honor. Polaris alignment, solstice markers. Father Durant has astronomical charts that confirm. I've seen enough. Harlan turned to face the assembled crowd. Courthouse, day after tomorrow, 9 o'clock. Mr. Morse, bring your Spanish grant. Mr. Bridger, bring these photographs and Miss Nayland's expert testimony. His gaze swept over everyone. And I want written affidavits from every witness here. What you saw, what you heard, dated and signed. He climbed back into his buggy. Before leaving, he looked at Clayton directly. I suggest you pray your grant references these markers. Any legitimate Spanish survey would have. The buggy rolled away, leaving stunned silence in its wake. Clayton's face had gone white. This proves nothing. Indian rocks and church photographs won't stand against legal precedent. 43 witnesses, Clayton. Martha's voice cut through his bluster. You touch any of us, everyone will know who did it. Clayton jerked his horse's reins hard enough to make the animal dance. I'll see you in court, Bridger, where you'll learn words on stone mean nothing. But his hand shook on the reins as he rode away, Jackson and the others following. The sun crested the ridge, flooding the boundary with golden light. The markers seemed to glow, red sandstone catching fire. 200-year-old truth finally witnessed by enough people that it couldn't be ignored. Durant photographed it all. The courthouse steps were already packed by 8:45. Sam arrived with Nolan in the wheelchair, Durant pushing, Martha clearing a path through the crowd. 43 witnesses filed in behind them. Farmers and merchants, Apache elders and church deacons, the widow Henderson and the blacksmith, all taking their seats like an army reporting for duty. Standing room only by the time Judge Harlan's clerk called the court to order. The air thickened immediately. Too many bodies in too small a space. The smell of tobacco smoke and nervous sweat mixing with the leather and ink scent of legal business. Durant's photographs were mounted on 3 easels beside the judge's bench. Large format prints, clear enough to see every carved symbol. Sam's original 1868 homestead patent lay on the plaintiff's table. Clayton's Spanish grant, crisp, suspiciously clean for a document allegedly 50 years old, sat opposite. Harlan entered at 9 sharp, his face unreadable. The gavel struck once. This court convenes to resolve deed dispute, Bridger versus Morse. Counselors, present your evidence. A lawyer from Tucson stood at Sam's table. Pro bono, arrived yesterday on the evening stage, sent by someone who'd heard about the case. Young, hungry, the kind of lawyer who took cases for principle instead of pay. Your Honor, the matter before you is simple. Whose claim to this land is legitimate? He gestured to the photographs. These boundary markers predate Mr. Morse's alleged Spanish grant by 137 years. Alleged? Clayton's lawyer shot to his feet. Your Honor, we have a certified Spanish land grant. Certified by whom? Sam's lawyer cut in. Which Spanish colonial office? Under which governor? Every legitimate grant from that period required reference to existing boundary markers per colonial survey law. I asked the court, where in Mr. Morse's grant are these markers mentioned? Clayton's lawyer shuffled papers, searching. They're not mentioned, Sam's lawyer continued, because Mr. Morse never verified his grant against physical evidence. He assumed, or hoped, no one would check. Objection. Speculation. Then let's deal in facts. Sam's lawyer turned to face the gallery. Mrs. Martha Henley, please approach. Martha stood, walked to the witness box with her head high. The clerk swore her in. Mrs. Henley, you've lived in Clearwater how long? 23 years. And in that time, how many families have lost their land to Mr. Morse through foreclosure? Clayton's lawyer stood. Relevance, Your Honor. Pattern evidence, Sam's lawyer replied calmly. Goes to methodology and intent, Harlan considered. I'll allow it. Martha's voice carried clear to the back benches. 8 families, all on the Verde River. All with the same story. Clayton buys their debt, produces an old Spanish or Mexican grant claiming the land, forecloses during the legal dispute. Did you witness these proceedings? Every one. My husband was number 3. Her hands gripped the witness box rail. He died fighting Clayton's claim in 71. Heart gave out from the stress. The courtroom murmured. Harlan's gavel silenced it. In the bank records, Sam's lawyer produced a folder. Your Honor, these show a pattern. 8 properties, 8 foreclosures, 8 subsequent sales to the railroad or mining interests, all at substantial profit to Mr. Morse. Clayton's face darkened. His lawyer objected strenuously. But Harlan was examining the documents with the expression of a man who'd stopped pretending this was routine. Miss Nayland, Sam's lawyer shifted focus. You are federally appointed treaty interpreter, correct? Yes. Nayland's voice was steady despite her obvious fatigue. Since 1872. Your credentials, please. The clerk brought them forward. Harlan examined them thoroughly this time, no longer dismissive. Federal Commission, specialized in Apache land law and boundary treaties. The court recognizes your expert status. Relief flooded through Sam like cool water. The photographs before you, Sam's lawyer continued, show astronomical carvings. Can you explain their significance? Nolan did, clearly, methodically, explaining how star positions proved the markers dated to 1683, how winter solstice alignments worked, how Spanish colonial law required all land grants to reference existing boundary markers. And Mr. Morse's 1820 grant references these markers? It does not. Why is that significant? Because any legitimate Spanish surveyor in 1820 would have documented markers already standing for 137 years. Their absence from his grant suggests, she paused, choosing words carefully, suggests the grant was written by someone who never visited the land. The courtroom erupted. Harlan's gavel struck 3 times before order returned. Sam's lawyer let the moment settle. Then, Your Honor, I propose a simple test. If Mr. Morse's Spanish grant is legitimate, he should be able to verify it against the physical evidence. I ask Mr. Morse to translate the Apache symbols on these markers, the ones his grant supposedly supersedes. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Sam hadn't expected this. Clayton stood slowly. I'm not a translator, yet you claim to own land marked by these symbols. Surely you verified their meaning before asserting conflicting ownership. They're meaningless, savage. Marks. Clayton stopped himself, but too late. Meaningless? Sam's lawyer turned to Nayland. Miss Nayland, please translate for the court. Specifically, what do these meaningless marks say? Nolan's voice filled the courthouse. Where sacred water rises, marked by ancestors, witnessed winter solstice 1683, blessed by 3 clans, Chiene, Nde, Mescalero, protected for 7 generations. Your Honor, Sam's lawyer pressed, the astronomical evidence confirms the 1683 date. Father Durant's ecclesiastical astronomical charts verify the star alignments. Mr. Morse's Spanish grant makes no reference to these markers, violating Spanish colonial survey law, and he cannot explain why his supposed grant ignores physical evidence any legitimate surveyor would have documented. The silence stretched. Harlan examined both deeds, the photographs, Durant's charts. His face revealed nothing, but his hands moved with the deliberate care of a man who knew his next words would echo. The gavel rose. Fell. The court finds as follows. First, the Apache boundary markers predate defendant's Spanish grant by documented astronomical evidence. Second, defendant's grant fails to meet Spanish colonial legal requirements for authenticity. Third, pattern evidence suggests systematic fraud. Harlan's voice carried weight now, judicial certainty replacing political calculation. Mr. Bridger's 1868 homestead patent is the sole legal claim to the disputed property. Morse's debt claim is void. All documents claiming conflicting ownership will be surrendered within 24 hours. Another gavel strike. Furthermore, the court orders investigation into 8 prior foreclosure cases following the same pattern. Bailiff, Mr. Morse is to remain available for questioning. The courthouse exploded with noise. Sam sat frozen, unable to quite believe what he'd heard. Martha was crying. Durant had his eyes closed in what looked like prayer. The Apache elders sat with quiet dignity, as if they'd known all along how this would end. Clayton was being escorted out by the bailiff, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. At Sam's bench, he stopped. Enjoy your water, Bridger. The railroad will find another source. Sam met his eyes. They already did, at fair price. $12,000 for a permanent easement. I keep the land, they get the water. Legal, honest. He paused. The way it should have been from the start. Clayton's shock was worth every sleepless night. The bailiff pulled him away. The railroad agent found Sam outside the courthouse at 2 that afternoon. The crowd had dispersed, victory celebrated. Witnesses, returning to their ordinary lives, transformed somehow by what they'd done together. Mr. Bridger, the agent extended his hand. Firm grip, honest eyes. Raymond Caldwell, Southern Pacific. We discussed the water rights easement last week. Sam shook his hand. The $12,000. Still standing? With gratitude. That water source makes our southern depot viable. Caldwell produced a contract, official and detailed. Permanent easement. We pipe water for railroad use. You retain all land rights and personal water access. Fair compensation for fair dealing. Sam signed. The pen scratched against paper, the sound somehow final. $12,000. More money than he'd seen in his entire life. Enough to live comfortably for 20 years, expand the ranch, hire help. He took $2,000 in bank draft, wrote it out to the Bureau of Indian Affairs. For Apache School Fund, he told Caldwell. Via Miss Nayland's designation. Nayland, standing with Durant nearby, went very still. Sam, you don't have to... I know. He handed her the draft. But those stones saved my land. Your people marked sacred water 200 years ago, and that truth is what stood up in court. Seems right, some of that railroad money goes back to teaching the next generation. The railroad agent cleared his throat. Miss Nayland, while I have you both here, Southern Pacific needs treaty interpreters for the Southern Spur expansion. Salary position? Housing provided. We'd be honored if you'd consider it. Nayland looked at Sam, then back to Caldwell. I would need time to heal first. And then take all the time you need. Position will wait. After Caldwell left, Martha appeared with news that 3 other families were filing civil suits against Clayton. The pattern, broken, confidence restored. Durant reported the bishop had sent a telegram supporting his stand, church politics shifting when righteousness proved profitable. The sun was setting when Sam finally got Nayland back to the ranch. She was exhausted, fever-free but depleted, her leg aching from the day's strain. You saved my land, he said, helping her inside. You saved my life first. Seems we're even then. She smiled slightly. Apache custom says when life debt is honored, friendship remains. A pause. The stones will need tending. Someone must teach proper star reading. If invitation stands, and Sam understood what she was asking, would she be welcome to return after her leg healed, after she took the railroad position? Not as a patient, as family. It stands, he said, always. 3 days later, they held the ceremony at dawn. A small gathering this time. Sam and Nayland, Durant and Martha, the 2 Apache elders who'd testified. They stood at the main irrigation spring on Sam's property, the water source that had started everything. Nayland planted the willow sapling with her own hands, working from the wheelchair, her splinted leg extended. The smell of wet earth rose as they placed the young tree, its roots drinking deep. She spoke the blessing in Apache first, then translated, May this water remember kindness. May this land bridge 2 peoples. May truth grow as this tree grows, rooted deep, reaching high. Sam added soil from Anna's grave, a handful of earth that had held his wife, now feeding new growth. Durant blessed it with holy water. Martha poured irrigation water at its base. The Apache elders spoke words Sam didn't understand but felt anyway, the weight of 7 generations, the promise of 7 more. They shared bread and corn as the sun rose fully. The willow's shadow fell across both Sam's land and the treaty boundary, a perfect marker, grown from choice instead of carved from necessity. New boundary stone, Nayland observed. One we made together. Sam studied the shadow, the way it bridged the invisible line that separated peoples on maps but never really separated water or wind or the way light fell across the earth. 8 years he'd worked this land alone, carrying grief like stones in his pockets. Now, kneeling beside Nayland to water a tree, neither of them would live to see fully grown, he felt something he'd forgotten existed, the weight of hope. Not the hope of possession, he'd learned that lesson, the hope of continuance, that water would flow after he was gone, that this tree would grow. That the truth carved in stones and planted in soil would outlast the men who tried to bury it with forged papers and legal tricks. The willow drank deep, its leaves already turning toward the morning sun. Clayton Morse sat in a territorial jail cell, awaiting trial on 8 counts of fraud. Judge Harlan had suddenly remembered what justice looked like when 43 witnesses were watching. The land remained exactly where it had always been, belonging to whoever honored it properly, regardless of what any paper claimed. And the water still flowed, cool and clean and constant, just like it always had, just like the stones remembered it should. Now this all happened back in the spring of '76, when Arizona was still territory, and a man's claim to anything depended more on who he knew than what was, right? Sam Bridger kept that land another 32 years. The willow grew 40 feet tall, branches draping over the spring like a benediction. Railroad paid him $12,000 for water rights. He never wanted for much after that, though he never moved from that modest adobe, never remarried. Some men carry one love through a lifetime. Sam carried 2, Anna's memory, and the land she'd dreamed they'd build together. Nayland took that railroad job, worked treaty negotiations clean through to statehood in 1912, spent winters in Tucson, summers at Sam's ranch, teaching Apache children to read both law books and boundary stones. She never married, kept her own counsel mostly. The thing about folks who fought for dignity, they don't surrender it easy afterward. Clayton Morse served 6 years in territorial prison for fraud. 8 families got their land back, though the legal battles took years. He died in 1884, broke and bitter, Some men never learn that stealing always costs more than it pays. Father Durant got his bishop's commendation after all. Turns out standing for truth is good politics when you win. He baptized 3 of Nolan's nieces, married 2 of Martha's granddaughters, buried Sam in 1908, right beside Anna, under that cottonwood they'd planted 40 years before. The boundary stones still stand. Park Service marks them now, preserved as historical landmarks. Tourists photograph them without knowing what they meant. That papers lie, but earth remembers. That justice is slow but roots deep. That sometimes the stranger you save ends up saving you right back. Age teaches you this. The strongest claim to anything isn't written in ink or carved in stone. It's written in how you treat people when nobody's watching and the law won't help you. The willow's still there, still growing, still marking where 2 peoples chose bridge over boundary, truth over paper, honor over greed. And the water? The water still flows.